next one is, how do you determine if a company values include inclusion and diversity? Is diversity a key for creating an inclusive environment?
I think Carol mentioned earlier is just checking out their webpage is really important, and the diversity they have on their page. I actually contacted someone recently. It wasn't a company, but it was an organization that was trying to do outreach for STEM, and I actually contacted them and said, do you realize you have no minorities or women represented on your webpage? And they were very open to my feedback about it. This was here in Wisconsin, and within a couple days I checked their webpage and they'd made changes. So just pointing it out sometimes in a company, or just having that discussion about things that they just might not be aware of. Of course, I'm talking about after you actually get the job. Not when you're interviewing, but those are the things you can look out for is their profile and their public face.
And Kim's absolutely right. I mean, especially the websites today, that's where people go to find information. So one of the things to think about too is diversity. If you don't have inclusion is the secret sauce that brings it together. So just because you have a diverse group of people, are you being inclusive? Are you seeing people getting together and spending time together, or you still see people kind of segregated out? The inclusion is what really makes things happen, and they go hand in hand. So you really can't have a successful diversity program if you don't have inclusion, if that makes sense. So you'll see that, and if you don't have them, if they don't go together, then they're not going to be successful in their D&I as they work through their D&I program.
In the long and short term, how do we sustain diversity and inclusivity in the STEM career environment?
Well, this is similar to I guess this is the same answer that I had for some of the others. In the short term, it's up to each and every one of us to help and to recognize some of these challenges to diversity and inclusivity. Like Robert was asking earlier about how do you introduce people to it. Some people just aren't even aware of it. They don't understand that they may be inadvertently or maybe purposely leaving people out of the conversation. Cultures are very, very large ships, and they're very slow to turn. So in the short term, we can all help with our efforts. Like Carol says, continue to read and continue to try to understand what diversity is, whether it is something that we typically think about, whether that's gender or racial diversity, or is it more of a cultural or a background or an educational diversity that we need to help sustain, and how do we make sure that it's inclusive? When I talk to certain organizations and they have very strict requirements, sometimes they don't realize that while professionally you can have certain requirements, it might limit the inclusivity of that either team or that organization. So in the short term, I think it's up to a lot of us. In the long term, I saw the profiles on many of the scholars, and it looks like a lot of them are either in leadership positions or are aspiring to leadership positions. In the long term, it's up to you to help support programs, develop programs, and create mentorship opportunities to allow that diversity and inclusion to not just start, but to thrive and flourish and kind of spread. Once it starts to spread, that's a big part of the sustainability over the long term.
One technique that I heard recently, and I actually heard that former President Obama used to do this, is to have more of an inclusive environment is sometimes, and I'll talk about women, but this could be true with minorities also. A woman might have an idea, and it's not such a great idea, and then the man kind of has the idea, and it's all of a sudden a great idea. So by supporting each other and actually repeating the ideas of what your counterparts are saying, and is a really good technique to show that, oh, I think that's a great idea, and show that support. So supporting each other within the company or in the classroom or things like that is really helpful. In helping, I tend to say students because I work with students, employers or employees feel like they belong. So teaching your fellow employees or even your boss. That's a really good technique to use.